For Trichomes.com, I'm Jesse Batend, and this is The High Ground. On this show, we feature leaders of the cannabis industry. We talk to everyone from farmers to CEOs and public officials, anyone making an impact on the cannabis community and beyond. Len has ADD, and it used to cause him a lot of trouble in school. When Len tried cannabis for the very first time, he remembers instantly feeling like he could just suddenly focus. And from that point on, Len developed an interest in the scientific study of cannabis and the potential medical benefits. Now, today, Len's company is asking a very interesting question, which is, what can our DNA tell us about our relationship with cannabis? Len's company has created a product called Endo DNA, which uses DNA analysis similar to companies like 23andMe to look at their customers' DNA and create a report detailing their body's personal relationship with cannabis and how to maximize the positive benefits that they're looking for. It's really, really fascinating stuff, so I decided to call Len up and find out a little bit more. Quick note before we get to the interview, unfortunately, you'll hear that my side of the conversation had some technical issues, so I don't sound that great, but luckily Len does, but apologies about that, and we'll be back to full strength next week. All right, let's get to the interview. So I have heard you talk about your company as a personal mission. I was hoping that you could kind of just tell me, what exactly that mission is and why it means so much to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, my mission started because cannabis became my go-to medicine when I was a teen, and I was diagnosed with ADD. So I'm an immigrant. I was born in Lithuania. I came over as a very young kid, and my parents are very old school. They were, Soviet Union type of a family. And I was always the kid that didn't have the hyperactive part of it, but I had all the multiple windows that would open up in my head and kind of drift off due to lack of dopamine production, all that stuff that I found out later. But I was put on prescription medication, and most of it made me feel like shit. So I was hanging out with some older kids, and they asked me if I wanted to smoke a cigarette. I was like, yeah, that's a cool thing to do. So I took a drag of their cigarette, and the cigarette was actually filled with cannabis, and I didn't know, and kind of got down coughing, went back to class, and the windows that were in my head, they started slowing down, and I could focus. And I'm like, well, that's great. So I was reusing it. I didn't know it was, any therapeutic product or anything like that. But I was using it. When I used it, that's what I got from it. And I was using it also, as with friends and hanging out. And then that sort of became my go-to medicine. My parents didn't really care for that. So, kind of long story, but they ended up kicking me out and for, consuming cannabis. I actually called the cops on me, tried to have me arrested.
Wow.
But the irony of this whole thing is that my parents both consume formulations that I've created specifically now. So it kind of came full circle. So that's how it started. Wow. Yeah, it started with that. And then I became an activist. I was the president of the Cannabis Action Network, and then moved to LA about 11 years ago. I got into the dispensary space because I thought that's where I would be able to make the biggest contribution in the cannabis space. And my frustration has always been this example. So two people with the same exact symptomatic conditions, they would consume cannabis, the same exact cultivar or strain, whatever you want to call it, and they would have a different experience. And I just became obsessed. So the type of ADD that I have, it's either you kind of float, or you can hyper focus on one thing. And this became sort of an obsession. Try to find why this is happening. And I found a video from a guy named Kevin McKernan, who's one of the first people who genetically sequenced cannabis. And I became obsessed over that. And I tried to figure that out. So I met with Kevin, ended up going to work with their company called Medicinal Genomics. And I was doing plant genomics. So getting plant material from different cannabis plants, bringing it back to my lab, extracting the DNA, purifying the DNA, and then sending it to Boston, Woburn, Mass, to a sequencer. And we started the first genetic library of cultivars based on our DNA called Cannapedia. And so that was my entrance in the DNA space. And my personal mission is still basically the same. And one of the aha moments in starting my company it became this sort of connection from the plant genetics, because there's so many different chemicals and compounds in the plant, close to 500 different ones. And then we have, all this DNA. So the moment that I really kind of realized, and this was my light bulb moment, is that we had a meeting at Harvard Medical School of physicians that were treating kids using CBD for epilepsy. And they were having a lot of success. But then some of the doctors were saying that the seizures either start coming back or it wasn't working that well. And the company, they had a company, a parent company of medicinal genomics called Cortigen Life Sciences. So one of the things they did is pharmacogenomics, which is genetic sequencing for diagnostics like different disease states, cancer, epilepsy, autism, all kinds of different things. So looking at biomarkers, specific, genetic biomarkers, we saw that there was a pattern. And the pattern was a specific type of epilepsy, which was, or is called, Dravet syndrome. And ended up publishing on that. But that was my moment when I said, oh, wait, there must be a connection between human genetics and the plant genetics, because it's not everybody with epilepsy. It just has specific biomarkers. So that's kind of how the idea was planted to start Endocanna Health.
So I actually kind of have a couple of questions about that journey that I'd love to dig into just a little bit. And I guess the first most obvious one is once you kind of figured out that cannabis was something that helped with your ADHD, what did that journey look like for you in terms of trial and error? Did you struggle to find things that worked for you consistently once you kind of determined that was something that did offer some support?
Yeah, I mean, I was in Philly. First, it was illegal. So what you do is you go down the way, and Jerome down the way he has a tennis ball, and in the tennis ball there's a slit in it, and you give him your $20 and he'll give you 5 nickel bags, they're held in a tennis ball. And Jerome, what he does is, and I'm just using Jerome because I don't remember the dude's name, to be honest with you, but I think it was Jerome. But anyway, so you pull up to the guy, you give him a 20. He said, what do you want? He said 5. And then what he does is he throws the tennis ball over to his buddy that's standing a little bit further down. So you're not actually doing the exchange of money and cannabis at the same time. That guy that gets the tennis ball, he opens it up and gives you the 5 nickel bags. And there were a couple of times where you give the $20, the ball gets thrown, you pull up to the other dude, and he's like, what you want? And I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, you better get on your way. So, that happened many times too. But yeah, so we were lucky if we had not a lot of stems and seeds in our cannabis then. So I didn't know what worked, but obviously, I would have different experiences from different things, but I had no idea. And the real moment where I actually realized that this was truly medicine, I had a rally at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. This was the first legalization rally on federal property in Philadelphia, because, as you know, I'm sure you know, and that's where the Liberty Bell is, and that's where the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and all written on hemp paper, by the way. So my keynote speaker was this lady named Elvie Mosica. So Elvie was one of the first people to get federally prescribed cannabis under the NIDA program. So I think there was 16 people at its height. And when she opened up her jar with a USDA label of pre-rolled like cigarette joints, so it's cultivated in Mississippi, it's sent to another location, they make them little cigarettes, and they have like a little tin. And she lit that up in front of federal rangers. And I was like, yes, legalization is happening now. And, obviously it took about 25 years or so later. So I don't know if we made any dent in that, but it happened. But the moment so everybody stayed at my house, and she lived in San Francisco, I think, at that time, if I'm not mistaken. I was in Philly. Everybody stayed at my house, and I was seeing this girl. She was an artist, and she made this big sculpture in my house. And everybody's sleeping. All we hear is a big noise, bang. And what happened was Elvie walked in and broke the sculpture. So the reason why Elvie gets or was getting cannabis is she's got degenerative glaucoma. She's legally blind. She can't see. So when she wakes up, she's really blind. And when I saw her consume cannabis and then she was able to see, I mean, still with glasses, that's when it kind of clicked for me. I'm like, wait a second. It not only medicine for me or what I think is medicine, but I saw with my own eyes somebody that's completely blind, can't see, consume cannabis, and then was able to see again. And that kind of, started my whole mission.
Wow. That's an incredible story. One more question, not to get too far off track, but it's interesting just because of your unique perspective, and I don't want to let the opportunity pass by. I also have immigrant. Well, my dad's an immigrant, and I guess I'm just curious. You said yourself that your parents were, not supportive of cannabis use, or didn't look favorably on that. But like, I wonder. I know. Just speaking of my own experience, and my dad probably wouldn't love that I'm talking about this, but like, I know for him, there was an additional fear with consuming cannabis or being caught, purchasing cannabis or something like that before it was legal in Illinois, simply because he was an immigrant. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that's something, especially with people who, my dad was legally here. He just was like worried about ending up on some list or something like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Does that fear kind of exist? And do you think that that's getting better with legalization?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. That was the biggest. So the biggest thing was I kept getting caught smoking. And mm-hmm. at some point when I was like 16, I'm like, well, I'm just going to do it. And that's it. And I was kind of a rebellious kid. I would go in my room and open up the window and smoke out the window, and I kept getting caught. So the deal was that I don't bring in the house. My dad said it's illegal. I don't want to get arrested. They thought heroin and cannabis was basically the same thing. They had no idea what it was. So I ended up not bringing in the house. So when I got kicked out or whatever, I actually kept it in my car under the front seat. So one day I got up. We used to go out clubbing, or once again I had fake ID, so I would go out, under 21. But and then we would go fishing. We'd come home like 2:00 in the morning or whatever it was, and we would go night fishing and then come back in the morning, and then would sleep half the day. And I woke up in the middle of the afternoon. I walked downstairs in the kitchen, and my parents have my little pouch that had like my little weed and pipes and all that stuff. So that's how it started. So I'm like, hey, you went through my stuff. My dad's like, I told you not to bring it in the house. I'm like, I didn't bring it in the house. It was in my car. He's like, but it's on my property. So it started like that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The legalization thing is a huge, huge stigma for, I'm not even sure if just immigrants, maybe, but I think it's just the older generation that really is concerned about being law-abiding citizens and all that stuff. And, having it to be decriminalized and legal in different places definitely removed a lot of that part of the stigma.
Yeah, and I've also talked to Black doctors who have talked about people of color having a similar fear or concern about using cannabis medicinally, even if it's completely legal, simply because of the history. Let's shift a little bit just into talking about what exactly your product does. How exactly do these DNA tests work, and what exactly do these results kind of tell a person?
Yeah, so the overall goal is to use DNA as a guide to guide you to an optimal wellness journey. And what that does, it looks at all your specific genes that have to do directly or indirectly with your endocannabinoid system. And I can go geek out on science as you want on the endocannabinoid system, but I'll keep it a high level right now, and then you can ask me more specific questions.
Sure.
So there's the way that it was put together and the way that it works is the first thing we did is we researched. So we looked at every single SNP, and a SNP is a single nucleotide polymorphism. It's basically taking the DNA helix apart, making it flat, and each one of those markers is a single nucleotide polymorphism. So these A lot of them are directly or indirectly associated with your endocannabinoid system. And since your endocannabinoid system is basically your primary modulating system, so think of it as the puppet master for all the other systems. In order for different activity to go on in different systems, you have to modulate your endocannabinoid system. So the first thing we did was research. We looked at all those SNPs. The second thing we did was we built a custom chip with a company called Illumina. So that is a chip that's specifically built for us. So it looks at all the different markers, of like somewhere around 700,000 specific markers. And then we can report on those using our DNA kit. And I'll explain how that works as well. But the chip is really unique because it's like a super chip. And what it does, it looks for those specific markers in a DNA sample that somebody would submit. And it verifies that you are present for that DNA sample. Or that SNP, and then what's called, once again, I'm probably going to get really sciencey, but it's called a genotype. So a genotype is your allele combination. I'll explain that. So our DNA, computers speak to us in ones and zeros. There's a binary code. Everything on top of that is your user interface, the graphics, but all underneath all that, it was ones and zeros. And DNA speaks to us in 4 letters, a C, a T, an A, and a G. Those are called nucleotides. And that combination of those 2 letters that you inherit from your parents is your genetic material. That's your genetic predisposition. Certain genes we're born with, and we cannot do anything about to change unless there's like a nuclear mutation or something of that nature. But like your skin color, your eye color, your hair color, male pattern baldness, like I have. Like this is your built-in genotype. But there are certain genes that, with your lifestyle and what you do, can actually be turned on and off, like an on and off switch. So if you are aware of your genetic predispositions based on action that you take, what you put into your body, your mindset, etc., you can think of it, you can turn it on or off. And that's really our goal. So now that I set this up, but the next thing we did was we built our kit. And the kit is really simple, sort of very similar to like a 23andMe or an Ancestry. It's a kit inside. The kit is a buccal swab, which think of it as a big Q-tip. You swab the inside of your mouth. You put it back in the box. You register because every single kit has a unique license code. And this is really important. I want everybody to really, really know this because security and data security is extremely important to us. We're HIPAA compliant. And one of the things we pride ourselves on is making sure that your data is secure and encrypted. And frankly, we don't care about people's personal information. So we maintain all our data on Amazon's AWS, and we're HIPAA compliant on AWS. And the reason why we don't care about your personal information, because our data gathering is about genotypes. So the goal is to have 1,000 people that have the similar genotype that consumed, product or formulation X and had a result. That way, our AI learns from that experience, and we get better in our suggestions. So that's how, anyway, you put the sample in, you mail it back to our lab, and within 2 to 4 weeks, depending on, how long, when it reaches the lab, you will get an email that your results are ready. The second way that you can actually get information to us, if you've already taken a 23andMe or an Ancestry or any of the other DNA tests, you can take your raw data that belongs to you from one of those services, and you can upload it directly to our site, and you will get a report instantaneously within 30 seconds or less. So that's the process. Now, the second question is, you asked, what is it that you actually get? So what you get is you get several different things. You go into the portal, which is a personalized portal, and it has lifetime updates, by the way. So if there's any new information, new reports, new research, you're always being updated. Oh, cool. So we have right now 75 reports in 15 different categories. What we'll do is we'll show you what your genetic predisposition is to things like stress and anxiety, cognitive function, metabolism. And metabolism is really important. On how you metabolize will guide dosing. So if you're a poor metabolizer of THC, you may not want to consume an edible, for instance, you may want to skip your first pass. We look at musculoskeletal, we look at pain, predispositions, insomnia, bruxism, which is grinding your teeth. Let's see, what else? Any THC side effects. So psychoneurotic, which is psychosis-like effects, or psychomotor control. So if somebody is, consuming THC at the moment, perhaps they can have an experience where you have psychomotor control issues. So an example would that be like you're high and you try to find your keys and your keys are right in front of you, you don't see them, or you have coordination issues. So different people have different impairments that they're more prone to using certain cannabis, and especially if somebody's prone to anxiety or depressive feelings and stuff. So the amount of THC versus other cannabinoids and the terpene profile that you would consume in your formulation can actually guide your experience. So what our overall goal is to avoid an adverse event so somebody can have an optimal experience. In addition to that, there are drug interaction reports. So most people don't know that certain prescription medication, cannabis can have an interaction with. So it can be an inhibitor. So it can affect the efficacy of your prescription medication. So if you're taking like an SSRI or antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication, cannabinoids interact with that. Also, like blood thinner medication, they interact with that. So we have 206 different prescription medications. So we have a database for that. You can put in your medication. You can see if there is a potential interaction with cannabinoids. And then we're also adding in nutrients, vitamins, over 500 different ones as well. And the end goal of this is now that you have we flag the genotype, we tell you what you want to avoid, sort of like a GPS. And then we give you your suggested ratios, what is more optimal based on your DNA. And then the third thing that we do is we use certificates of analysis from different manufacturers anywhere, and we run it through our proprietary algorithm and give you the percentage of match. So there's a product that's near you, that's geofenced, and it'll tell you, this product is a 60% match. This product is a 50% match or 80% match, whatever that is. So that's kind of how it works.
That's awesome. So, a couple of questions there. I guess the first most obvious one is this something that, you would advocate someone potentially do before their first trip to a dispensary, and that could help potentially guide them through that first experience?
Absolutely. So one of the statistics are, and by the way, I think I missed mentioning that every single thing that we report on must have a peer-reviewed essay associated with it. So most of our peer-reviewed studies are NCBI, PubMed, but we get studies from everywhere. So we get studies in using AI. Then we have a team, our science team, that reviews those studies for different things like the validity of that study, and there's a rating system. So the rating system is like if it's an in vivo study, if it's an in vitro study. So it depends if it's in the test tube or it's in an animal or it's in the human. They have a different rating system to all those. And then our science team then takes those studies and we make a decision whether to include them or not. And our science team includes Dr. Ethan Russo, Dr. Mike Tagan, Dr. Chris Spooner, and then, me, basically not a doctor. And then we make a decision whether to include those studies. And so, yes, the main purpose is for everybody to avoid an adverse experience. So there's a couple of things that happens. Number one, it takes 6 to 8 different products for somebody to actually find an optimal product for them. That's what we've researched. That's what that's the research that we've found. But the issue that happens is if somebody has a negative experience, like one of the things I do when I speak, say, how many had a negative experience with cannabis, especially an edible? And at least half the room raised their hand. Well, what happens is if somebody has a negative experience, well, shit, they don't want to go back. They're scared of it. But not only are they scared of it, they tell everybody else, no, don't consume. And, it's starting to come out more and more these days. So what we want to do is avoid that negative experience in the journey. And then once somebody finds even if they don't do our test and they went through their 6 to 8 products and they spend all this money trying to find that and wasted their time, but they finally found, let's say it's flour, and they found their sour diesel is great for them. Well, they go to one dispensary and they get sour diesel. They go to another dispensary, it's called sour diesel, but then it has a completely different terpene profile. So it's not even the same sour diesel. So the consistency is not there. So what we've found is when people use our test and they have indication-specific formulations that they find, they tend to, and we were told by our partners, that they tend to repurchase the same product 70% of the time. So they come back and repurchase. So we're actually helping with brand loyalty, because there is no brand loyalty in our industry. Nobody cares. Everybody's looking for deals for the most part. So that lifetime value is increased by 70%. But the other thing that it actually illuminated me with, based on our partners, they said that not only are they getting the people to return, but because they found product XYZ help them to sleep, let's say, but now they hurt their knee or something like that, let's say they need something for inflammation, they come back to that same brand because it's also genetically aligned to them, and they have that trust that's built in with that brand that they're going to probably most likely purchase that line extension, that other product from that brand, because it's genetically aligned. So that's really what we've been seeing happening in the industry.
That makes perfect sense to me. And to follow up on that point, it sounds like, if I'm understanding you correctly, and this was one of my questions, is not only can you sort of tell the difference between which strain someone might be predisposed to enjoy, but you can actually tell within different batches or grows of a certain individual strain variations, and which particular batches might be, more plentiful in a certain area that would be more beneficial to someone. So I guess the follow-up question there is, does this lead, do you see a future someday where you'll be working with dispensaries where someone could kind of come in with their results and a bud tender might be able to say, like, absolutely, this strain, totally fits with your interactions? Or is that something that will probably stay outside of the dispensary environment?
Oh, no, we work with dispensaries today. It's exactly
cool.
it. Now, one of the challenges that we've always had in the retail model, in the dispensaries, is that when people come into a dispensary, they want to take away something right now. So by buying a kit, taking it home, swabbing, waiting a couple weeks to get the results and coming back, that's been a hindrance. So one of the things that we found on a retail level that's been working for us are bundles. So what we do is we have indication-specific products right now. So let's say dispensary, whatever the name of the dispensary, they have some formulations that are indication-specific for, insomnia. So they do bundles. They'll say, hey, take the kit and take the insomnia. But when you actually get your results, one of the things we can do is give you a BOGO or some sort of discount off your next product. So now you're left with a product, you're left with a kit. And then when you come back, now your genetically aligned products, which ones fit for you more. So at some point, our overall goal is to use this as a funnel. Even if we can give the test away at some point, it's about getting people the right products to meet their needs. And right now, we're looking at 4 different factors, which is your CBD, your THC, your primary and secondary terpene profile. And the reason why is because we're handcuffed by research. So if somebody, people are talking about minor cannabinoids, CBG, CBC, THCV, etc. But because there's not enough peer-reviewed references, or really none, we can't include those in our findings yet. But as the research becomes available and it's published and it's peer-reviewed, that will be part of our suggestion engine as well. So the overall goal, think about this as, I always like to talk about it as a GPS. So it's like your ways of cannabis. It'll show you that this road over here is an optimal road for you to take. This road over here, has a traffic jam, maybe there's an accident, but the road that's more optimal for you doesn't guarantee there's not going to be a pothole along the way here and there. So right now we're talking about personalized. Personalized means group of genotypes. As we get the feedback loop, because people are also reporting back to us saying, I got this product based on your suggestion, and they're reporting back how they're doing. So if they're on a pain scale of 8 when they first started, I'm just using it as an example, but after they're consuming the product, they're at a 2. Now our deep learning learns from that experience, and we can get a lot better. And as we get a lot better in our suggestions, the more people that use it, the better, more individualized we can get those suggestions for those formulations.
So I think that there's a general misconception out there, especially among people that are sort of recreational or adult use smokers, that medicinal cannabis is like really, really strong, that medical equals like it's going to get you really, really high. And while that certainly can be true, I read a study recently that was saying that in a lot of cases, medical cannabis is of a similar THC content to recreational cannabis. So I guess the question there is obviously there's more to it than just THC, and some patients are looking for other things. But are there perhaps some cases where people are having a bad experience simply because they're using cannabis that's just too powerful for them?
Absolutely. And I'm just going to preface, and maybe this is controversial, but I don't believe in recreational. Even the word doesn't make any sense. I understand the legalities of it, and I think that we should have a free market society, and this can be a regulated product, just like other regulated products, meaning that if I'm going to go into my GNC and I'm going to buy a nutraceutical, it has all my ingredients on there. I know it's been tested. I know it's been clean, and that's the way I want to buy my cannabis, that's going to be completely transparent and regulated in some way. But anything that alters you in any sort of way is a therapeutic product. And recreational, I don't even understand what that means. So you have to have it's a therapeutic product, and whether it's now, if you're going to do something that's specific in a hospital setting, and you want to give somebody a higher dose of THC because it's like they have extreme pain or something like that, I understand that through supervision of a physician. But you're absolutely right. Higher dose of THC can actually trigger. And I believe that a lot of things that we're seeing now as adverse effects, and like somebody's being paranoid, that is due to the higher dose of THC that we're seeing in cannabis today. I was doing an interview with this guy, and he's an older gentleman, and he said, "Yeah, I always equate a joint to a beer. That's the way we used to do it." I'm like, my man, if you smoke a whole joint by yourself now with 30% THC versus one Budweiser or whatever you're drinking, you're gonna have a completely different experience. So it's not like that nickel bag that I was buying down the way. It's not exactly like that anymore. And you're absolutely right too. It's the full plan, and that's why I think people don't understand. You have these concentrates that people consume and dab and everything else. You have extracted THC that's very, very concentrated. But when you looking at the whole plant, the therapeutic effects and the personalized effects are with the whole plant. So it's having, some THC, it's having some CBD, other minor cannabinoids, a terpene profile. Think about it this way. There is a gene for stress reactivity. So a lot of people, over 50% of the population walks around with this gene that makes them more susceptible to anxiety. And this the specific genotype is that gene is called FAAH, F-A-A-H. So what that gene does, it produces an enzyme that breaks down anandamide, which is one of our endogenous endocannabinoids. And the interesting thing about that is, this is what happens in stress. Well, every single day to people. Let's say somebody cuts you off in traffic. So somebody cuts you off in traffic, you have a stressful event. All of a sudden, your fight or flight kicks in. So you have adrenaline that's released. You have norepinephrine that's released. You have cortisol that's released. Now, when you realize there's no lion chasing in the jungle, you're fine, then your endocannabinoid system really goes to work. And one of the things it does, it releases anandamide, which is our bliss hormone, which helps us get back to balance and homeostasis. However, if you have a genotype that makes you have more FA than the average population, that means you have less anandamide. So you're prone to stress over longer periods of time. And that cortisol that's being pumped into your bloodstream, it stays there much longer. And what happens over time is it elevates your pH level. So it makes you more acidic. And when that happens, your immune system really doesn't like it. So it has an overactive immune response. And the way it acts is you have inflammation, usually in your joints, ankles, knees, wrists, etc. And people walk around inflamed in pain, and they don't understand what it is. And a lot of it has to do with stress. And my mom always told me, like, every disease has to do with stress. And, I hate to say it, but she's kind of right. But that's the why. Why is this happening? So because certain people have this genetic predisposition and they produce less anandamide, more prone to stress, having a little bit of THC can actually subsidize that, because THC mimics the way anandamide works within our bodies, especially when it's produced from the amygdala part of the brain. So it regulates mood. It regulates those pain sensors. It's the one that gives us the munchies. And by the way, think about it this way. When you get the munchies, you don't crave kale. You crave salt, sugar, and fat, because that's what makes us feel comfortable, right? It gives us that comfort feeling, that comfort mood. So, and that's the goal. But here's the key. If somebody with that genotype consumes a little more THC than they need, it'll trigger that stress reactivity gene. So that genotype will be triggered, and that's when people start getting that anxiety. Because I don't think people understand that THC is a vasodilator. And I think when people, any experience in any medication, any therapeutic substance, any psychedelic, anything you do is about set and setting. And the fear of the unknown is one of the major reasons why people have these challenges, and they forget to, and they don't even think about telling people about it. But because it's a vasodilator, what happens is your blood vessels actually expand more. So your heart has to work harder to pump blood through. And what happens is your heart actually beats faster. But people started being really afraid and say, oh my God, my heart's beating so fast because I took too much THC and blah, blah, blah. And then it triggers that stress reactivity gene. And now you're having anxiety because of a natural physical occurrence that happens anyway. But if you know this about yourself, and you know that the profile that you consume, especially with certain terpene profiles, the ones that are actually boosting serotonin, limonene, pinene, etc., that'll actually exacerbate that even more. But if you're consuming a more balanced formulation, and then your terpene profile may be linalool and myrcene and beta-caryophyllene, these are a lot more calming, humulene, etc. So finding that right profile and then getting it to the actual product that you need, that's the key. And removing that fear through education, I think that's when we'll actually get to the next level with this amazing therapeutic substance.
Len May is the CEO and co-founder of Endocanna Health. Len, thank you so much for taking the time to break all that down. And I seriously hope people give it a shot.
Yeah, I hope I wasn't too geeky and sciencey, but definitely check us out. So the company is Endocanna Health. The product and the website is Endo DNA, ENDODNA.com. And if anybody wants to hear more geeky talk about maybe even more interesting things like music, I also have a podcast called Everything is Personal, so somebody can check it out and interact with us that way as well. And you can find me on social, Len May DNA, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, all those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Highly recommend the podcast.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. I really appreciate what you're doing. And I think the more people hear, we do not do a great job of marketing. We're science and technology people in biotech. And these are great opportunities for us to be able to communicate this to everybody, because everything in the future, everything will be personalized. Your vitamins, your nutrients, your cosmetics, everything you put in your body will start with DNA. And if we have this capability and we have this technology now, think about what it's going to be in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
One last thing before we get out of here for this episode. If you're curious about Endo DNA and you want to give it a shot, Len is offering listeners of this podcast a special discount to give it a try. Just go to endodna.com, pick up the DNA kit, and use the code TRICOMES20 to get 20% off your purchase. Once again, that's endodna.com, promo code TRICOMES20 to get 20% off. You can find more cannabis industry reporting at tricomes.com, as well as more great shows like this one. If you're a member of the cannabis community and you have a story you want to share with us, reach out. You can reach the show at highground@tricomes.com. Please take a second to subscribe to the podcast and write a review. It really helps others find the show. You can also join the discussion with industry insiders and get your voice heard by joining the community at tricomes.com and following us on all social media. The show is produced by David Fortin. I'm Jesse Batend, and thank you for listening.